It was still dark when David awoke, although he wasn't entirely sure why he had even bothered to hope for even the most meager sliver of sunlight. Sighing, he rose from his musty bed and plodded from his room, taking his ratty stuffed bear with him to keep him company. It had gotten awfully lonely as the days had turned to weeks. Upon arriving at the kitchen, he went to the pantry, set the bear on the counter, and pulled out a can of soup. The gas stove was still in need of a repair, so he ate it cold. As he ate, he thanked his parents. Not for the first time, and certainly not for the last. The end is night. Those had been the last words of David's father, Matt, before the men in white took him away. David had wondered why he had said night instead of nigh. Matt had been an English professor and had hammered home the importance of proper grammar. It didn't seem normal for him to get those two words confused. Maybe it had something to do with that book he was reading, he thought, as he grieved. And struggled to understand what had happened with his father. The book had been discovered by one of Matt's friends during a dig in Arabia, and he had sent it to him for translation. As Matt had worked on it, both David and his mother Joan noticed the startlingly rapid change in his behavior. He stopped eating, wasting away into a pale, sweaty skeleton of a man as the air in his room grew stale and the lights within grew dim. He rarely spoke to them, seeming as listless as a zombie at times. His life came to revolve around that book, and David had on many a night angrily wondered why some stupid book was more important than him or his mother. Eventually, Matt had begun to modify the house, constructing strange devices from wood and painting odd symbols on the doors, walls, and ceilings. He bought guns which frightened him and his mother, and stocked the pantry with non-perishable foods, never telling them his reasons for any of it. Then came the day when the men in white came. They came after Joan had called them, worried for her husband's safety. They had dragged him from his room, kicking and screaming, and he had said those words. The end is night. David had wondered why he had gotten the phrase wrong. And then the day came when he realized that his father hadn't gotten it wrong at all. The boy finished the soup and discarded the can. Then he went to the window and slowly peered through the blinds. The sky above his little suburban street was as dark as night, thick with smoky clouds and only lit by flashes of green light. And floating high above the houses and people, scraping the clouds, were the monoliths. David had had to search for words to describe the large black blocks for several hours, looking through his father's encyclopedias in the dim light of the study where the books still lay, before he had finally found something which came close to describing what the strange devices looked like. Of course, they weren't actually monoliths. A monolith doesn't float silently and without any sign of internal propulsion. They didn't have long crystalline pipes which vomited torrents of dark smoke either. The only thing that gave their name any credence was the symbols on them. But these symbols weren't in any earthly language, and they glowed from within a bright neon red, which bathed the building below in soft crimson light. The monoliths had emerged a day or so after the sun had gone down, just before the first reports of mass suicides began, but after the first wave of looting and violence had occurred. Their arrival seemed to signify something within many, because the panic died down as thousands of people made their way to where they were floating, silent and imposing in the air. David and his mother had seen it on TV, and they had both been left unsettled at the way that the people moved, slowly and deliberately, past their friends and loved ones to the alien things. And David would never forget the deep, soul-crushing horror which had settled in his chest when he saw how they stripped and cast themselves naked into the dark shadows beneath the monoliths, emerging hours later with new and inhuman bodies. And then the attacks began. Hordes of abominations, which had once been David's friends and neighbors, streamed throughout the neighborhood, tearing through houses and dragging screaming people to the monoliths, where they were either thrown into the transforming shadows or pulled into the depths of the alien things by snaking tendrils of red light. But throughout the chaos, the beasts never once came near the house. It took her a while, but David's mother had figured out that it must have been the symbols and the devices built by her husband. The guilt she felt for having had him committed when he had saved them, coupled with the certainty that he was either dead or part of that slavering horde which had lay beyond their door, began to take its toll on her psyche. Her eyes and voice grew dull, and her words became tinged with a profound sadness which made David tear up whenever she spoke. He knew that she was headed down a dark road, and he tried to help her, to keep her company, but in the end, he hadn't been able to take on the role of comforting protector, and he found her hanging from an extension cord on the following night. There had been no way of burying her, and no one to call. So he had dragged her into the basement, trying to keep his eyes away from the dull eyes, reddened throat, and bulging black tongue as he did. Now the silence felt like a being unto itself, a living thing with great black wings which embraced the house and everything within. Even the thoughts, even the things outside had gone silent. One of them passed by the window, and David let the blind snap back into place, trying to banish the image of that mutilated, abhorrent, insectile face from his mind. He turned and went back to the counter, picking up his bear and cradling it close to his thinning body. He then turned his gaze towards the study. It's the book's fault, he thought, not wanting to break the silence lest the creature heard him. He went to the study, basking in the smell of his father as he entered, hoping against hope that he was alive in the asylum. Maybe he found a way to make more of those symbols in there, he thought, getting closer to the book, letting that faint hope briefly eclipse his fear of the thing which had driven his father to madness. Another step brought him within sight of the book, and he felt a chill tendril of dread wrap itself around his neck as he saw the blank cover come into sight. "You don't look so scary," he said to himself, his soft tones cutting through the stillness like a gunshot. Realizing what he had done, David clasped his hand over to his mouth, held his breath, and listened. When a full minute had passed and nothing had happened, he gently sighed and returned his gaze to the book. If the book started this, then maybe it can stop it. Maybe it can reverse everything, make things normal again, maybe bring my dad back. The image of his father arriving at the house as the sun's beautiful rays pierced the endless night, opening the door and rushing to meet his son, to hold and comfort him and soothe the scars in his mind, galvanized him, sparked hope within him for the first time in a long time. With a trembling hand, he reached out and opened the book. He screamed when he saw the writing inside leap out at him, as red and blinding as the light from the symbols on the monoliths, which were the exact same as the symbols on the page. The hope within him died, and David fled the room and barreled into the kitchen, weeping miserably. He sank to the floor, feeling the weight of what had and was happening to him fall over him like a lead pall. There was no going back. No reversing what had happened. His father and mother were gone. Forever. The world was overrun by nightmarish monsters. The monoliths would stay, and the night would last forever. Still sobbing, he felt the threads of his mind, already taxed beyond their limits, begin to strain further. He looked up, hoping to find some comfort in something well remembered, and his eyes fell upon the teddy bear. But as he looked into those unblinking glass eyes, he felt like the old stuffed animal was, of all things, mocking him. Looking at it, feeling his mind unravel still, he howled, "What are you looking at?" There was silence for a moment, and then a voice replied, "You." David let out a shriek and fell to the floor, trembling, his rapidly disintegrating mind repeating, "It's not the bear, it's not the bear, it's not the bear." The bear stood up, suddenly, and began to move towards him, sagging internally and jerking its limbs as it did. "It's not the bear, it's not the bear, it's not the bear." "We were wondering where you were hiding," it said, never slowing its advance. "We were all so worried. We've been waiting for you. You know." "It's not a bear. It's not a bear, not a bear, not a bear." "But now we can see you. We can all see you. And there's only one question remaining now that we know you're here." The bear hopped into his leg and scuttled across it like a large, misshapen spider before it stopped at his chest. He could see the black beads of its eyes rippling like an inky sea, and within that depth and profound darkness he saw the cunning eyes of an alien mind looking back at him. That question being, will you embrace us? The bear held its arms out. The last of David's sanity cracked, fractured, and splintered away into the dark wells of madness. Letting out a chuckle, David embraced the bear, having come to the conclusion that he would be united with his father and mother once he did. And so, he was drawn to the deepest darkness in the eyes of the intelligence which controlled it. The relief he felt when his skin sawed away. The relief he felt when his skin slowed away, and the tainted air, his new flesh, as his limbs unfurled, was paralyzed to any other emotion. Darkness fell.